Yeah, then my plan is slow on tags, fast on card text. I'm assuming everyone's okay with that. Okay. Cool. So then if anybody not ready? Okay, I'll go ahead and start. The advantage is econ. COVID-19 has crushed U.S. economic capacity. Highly skilled immigration is essential to sustainable and long-term growth. Yale Leahy Eason 20. With the use in a global pandemic, its economy battered to find seeking to growth, recovery, increasing skilled foreign workers helps the U.S. recover skilled immigration, boost innovation, investment, and economic growth. Immigrants disproportionately contribute to economic growth. For every additional skilled foreign worker hired, 7.5 new domestic jobs are created. And low caps on highly skilled immigration hinder economic growth by inducing firms to decrease investment. Shui 2020. Restrictions imposed by H-1B induces firms to decrease investment consistent with complementary between skill and capital and long-term impacts of private sector capital accumulation and its implications for economic growth. Hard caps on immigration create uncertainty, lead firms to delay investment decisions. And restrictive, highly skilled immigration policies ensure offshoring and cause the U.S.'s innovation capacity to fall behind. Glennon 20. Foreign affiliate employment increases as direct response to stringent restrictions on H-1B visas. The effect is strongest among R&D intensive firms. Employment increase in India, China, Canada. Multinational firms are responsible for 80% of U.S. R&D and employ 1/4 of employees. The multinational companies face with decreased access to visas have an offshoring option, hiring foreign workers they need to foreign affiliates, even if H-1B workers displaces some native workers. Policies aimed at reducing immigration encourage firms to offshore jobs. Immigrants are not equally innovative outside of the U.S. Restrictive policies cause the U.S. innovation capacity to fall behind. And past recessions prove the necessity of immigration for stability and recovery. Huang 2020. Immigration was associated with resilience in terms of employment and growth areas with higher shares of immigrants more likely to maintain growth past during recession and recover more quickly after. The effects are consistent across recession period. Immigrants complement a diversified need of workforce, bringing innovation or revitalized. And migration of highly skilled workers complements the innovation and manufacturing sector, decimating wage inequality and building a resilient economy, regardless of R&D and immigrant skill type. Das et al. 20. The analytical model shows that migration of high skilled talents complementary among innovation and manufacturing enable wage gap policy debates that wage inequality will worsen. Ignore how innovative sectors benefit low skill manufacturing, conducive skill of unskilled wage inequality decimates skilled migration. R&D sectors will lower wage inequality respective R&D and immigrant skill types. Resilience in the economy built by foreign human capital from workers improve host country welfare as the current slowdown hampers U.S. economy innovation is necessary for survival. And a lack of STEM workers hinders U.S. competitiveness and innovation. Kelly 16. Global challenges, including climate change, overpopulation, health need approach supported by development in science technology, address these challenges. Demand for STEM workers, economic challenges increasingly acute, driven by genuine shortages in STEM workforce. The urgency is evident. Achievement in STEM is preparing a workforce that sustain leadership. Growing concern developing America's scientists remain competitive in the global economy. Scenario 1 is growth. U.S. economic leadership is key to preventing intense global conflict. Thompson 2020. Technological changes have revitalized U.S. claim to world leadership without potential for genuine intelligence. Challenges are backed by the possibility China will make good in its future. Technological centrality, the safer prediction is political economic stability will give way to the extent that the present hierarchy are most likely to return to declining leadership and upwardly mobile challenges leading to intense global conflict. Global conflict seems closely linked to commercial rivalry. And the U.S. is still a global leader, but economic decline is eroding primacy. Additional foreign capital is key. McCormick et al. 20. Better sustain the country's economic might and leverage in the service of American primacy. The COVID-19 crisis, economic devastation of fuel concerns the U.S. led order by most measures. The United States enjoys preeminence of vibrant economies, sustain American power. America's serious headwinds that face a global economic mobility. The emergence of Asian economies drive as a global wealth challenged American preeminence. More to be done to sustain American primacy. The United States slow to adapt still needs to improve and develop human capital best address those issues. And U.S. retrenchment ends economic interdependence, causes nuclear warfare, spiraling proliferation, and spikes nationalism, causing destructive interventions. Phase 17. Some states feel a balancing good use drawn into a major war destruction of the system. 4 states compete retrenchment, heightened animosities over warms against military aggression, security competition, or the pacific effects of economic and open states might be aware of trading due to concerns of potential rivals, economic gains, the possession of nuclear weapons, but attractive options, their potential utility increases the potential for what states do not always adopt second check postures and increased number of weapon states will change its nuclear weapons will use lead sacks and unauthorized nuclear launch to mobilize the American public will require unifying methods. American leaders like the Russell populist sending tendency leads to American wars that are particularly violent and destructive. Scenario 2 is innovation. U.S. innovation spills over more broadly. Knowledge is shared across locations and innovation positively affects foreign countries. Valera Morales 20. Knowledge is shared across locations using data in the U.S.-based multinationals. We estimated that dynamic innovation model find evidence USRP systematically increases performance foreign affiliates. Parent technology is sufficiently complex and innovation enhances absorption. Our findings strongly suggest that policies create gains that are realized abroad. U.S. innovation subsidies will have a positive effect on foreign countries. And U.S. innovation is essential to global technological progress, which ensures global development, reduces terrorism, and world peace. Dreyfus and Lobel 16. Without a more nuanced view, foreign inventors, domestic inventiveness will suffer be harder to reduce the advances necessary to climate change and disease-driven biotics with openness, information, and technological progress. This approach contradicts the view of the U.S. as a benign world leader, helping countries raise development and democratization. Innovation is key to security, world peace, terrorism led by poverty. And climate change is existential. Kariva Kranza 18. Climate change, global freshwater cycle, ocean acidification pose existential risk. Combination of positive feedback loops is spread up capacity warming, cause more CO2 release, which increases warming, then trigger stresses, promulgates the greatest existential risk. And pandemics are existential, absent innovation. Ergo, Sauter 17. Pandemics are a threat to living Earth and all living species on even the smallest rarely to a percentage deviation of risk. Pandemics high uncertainty occurred anytime. The frequency of pandemics is high, and since we are more global world, the spread could be devastating consequences. We observe the spread in a way never seen before in history. The best way to reduce impact is progress in technology. Plan. The United States federal government should reform its immigration system by increasing the cap on annual highly skilled employment visas to 600,000 per year, increasing the cap on H-1B visa holders, and implement a two-step H-1B worker process where foreign workers are automatically allowed to transition to permanent resident status, abolishing the per-country cap on employment visas for highly skilled workers, solvency, substantial employment visa reform boost U.S. highly skilled immigration, innovation, and productivity. Griswold 17, reform U.S. immigration system significantly increase the number of permanent immigrant visas based on employment. The country system should welcome significantly larger highly skilled immigrant workers. U.S. immigration and increase the number to 600,000 per year to increase that magnitude would be sufficient to meet the demands of U.S. industry. Such an increase boost U.S. economic growth, innovation, and productivity reforms would boost the number of visas by 30%. The two-step process for workers enter initially as temporary workers. H-1B workers could be sponsored by employers or apply directly for permanent green cards based on their employment history. U.S. government should definitely expand the H-1B visas. Congress should repeal the per-country cap code to increase LPR. High skilled workers. The cap is currently budding for potential immigrants. The wasteland immigrants have been proven to be rejected. And immigration reform will not happen without the plan. The plan is key to attracting highly skilled immigrants. Huang and Arnold 20. Trump created slew new barriers for immigrants with new regulations. Federal authorities made it slowly costly, less than for immigrants. Immigrants are critical to sense technology, innovation, job creation, fit U.S. citizens, non-citizens like a sharp contrast. The U.S. COVID doesn't cause countries to backtrack. They're being committed to attracting skilled immigrants. America's near historic monopoly in the global market for foreign talent, speeding the stakes are getting higher. And empirically, highly skilled immigration ensures economic growth. Dossier 20. We use a rich data set that covers all United States. We take advantage of panel data to detect robustness tracks. The existence of skill complementaries between workers trained in different countries. Observed labor market R&D sectors. High skilled increases number of patterns. Average weekly income in natives. The fastest maximized when in required college education. A 10% increase in diversity of races GDP per capita by 6%. Okay, I'm open for cross when you are.
Okay, first question. Does the AF reduce restrictions on immigrants who are already studying in the U.S. or are already present in the U.S.?
I mean, it's impossible not to reduce restrictions on some people who are maybe like undocumented in the United States and want to apply for an employment visa. Like, that's just an impossible burden.
I mean, it's more like, is the AF through a port of entry? Is that where immigrants have to apply to get their green cards?
I mean, they have to go through the normal green card process.
Okay, I guess what does that entail?
So like it entails filling out the proper paperwork to get a green card, going through the background check process, that sort of thing.
Okay. Why is legal permanent residence key for this?
So legal permanent residence is key because otherwise we're having immigrants coming over for a few years and then going back to their host country. And that means that we're not getting the long-term economic gains and innovative gains necessary for the AF.
Okay. What innovative and economic gains do immigrants provide that the U.S. currently doesn't have?
Yeah, so I can give you, I would say 5 internal links to improving the economy and like 2 internal links to improving innovation. Would you like me to go through all those?
Okay. I guess my question is more in the context. So in the status quo with COVID, there is a ton of people who are unemployed and can't find work. Why would increasing the number of people who enter the country whenever there is already high unemployment, why would that be good for the economy?
I have a fantastic answer to that. And that is right now, labor markets are contracting, but highly skilled immigrants are going to expand labor markets. And that's because they do things like build jobs, work in cutting edge fields, those sort of things that attract more workers to it. So like if an immigrant comes to the United States and starts a technological firm, then they're going to be hiring 10, maybe 20 people. That's why.
But how would an immigrant come over and create a tech firm if they have to be sponsored to get a visa for an EB visa? Like an employer has to sponsor them for them to come over. How would this allow people to create businesses if they have to be sponsored by an already existing company?
A couple of things. One, they're not constrained by that existing company. Also, EB visas include entrepreneurs. 2, there's also like a lot of firms that they can work for where maybe like they have an assistant. They have people who are working underneath them in those firms. And also 3, they're high skilled jobs. So they're not really like they're areas where we have worker shortages that can't be filled by unemployed people right now.
Why?
So like we don't have, for example, someone who's really technologically advanced when it comes to climate change. And we can't use a domestic worker to do that. So we need a foreign worker to complement existing US workers.
Okay, I guess what evidence have you what evidence have you read that there aren't enough US high skilled people to fill these roles right now?
Kelly 16.
We find that.
Also, I've read many other warrants.
Kelly, so your evidence about a worker shortage is from 4 years ago. How does that reflect the current labor market whatsoever?
Okay, let me go to the piece of evidence. So 1, it's still talking about a inherent lack of STEM workers in the United States. We haven't fixed that in the past 4 years. I can read more recent evidence if you'd like. Second of all, my evidence is all contextual to the implications of having immigrants in recessions, like the Huang evidence, which is above it.
That's fine, actually.
Okay.
I just uploaded the document. The order is going to be 3 off, solvency, and then the advantage.
Okay, cool. Just give me a sec, sorry.
All good. Is anyone not ready?
I'm not. Give me 1 second.
Okay,
sorry.
yeah, absolutely. All good.
Okay, now I'm ready.
Okay. Is anyone else? Cool. First off is the internal brain drain. This had increased high-skilled immigration discourages students from pursuing degrees in STEM fields. That causes a shortage of U.S.-born STEM workers. Oriadness and the Vadi 13 immigration reduce relative returns to STEM occupations, reducing impetus for natives. Expected returns affect choice of major. Reduced earning students perceive increased competition for STEM jobs, even if labor does not change. Natives perceive fields as filled by immigrants. And the DoD is recruiting domestic graduates to stave off cyber attacks. A future shortage of STEM graduates would leave the military prone to attacks. For the 9-0 in 17, staying ahead of cybersecurity threats requires the Defense Department to hire the best people. Innovation today comes from industry, not the government. Issues of an exceptional workforce for the DoD to attract the best cybersecurity professionals, inspiring the next generation of cyber talent. Next generation of cyber talent will require a large pool of talent that is crucial to our nation's security. And cyber attacks on the military go nuclear. Newest studies do now in Lewis and 18 there are vulnerabilities which a malicious actor may infiltrate with a nuclear weapon system. Human error system failures and cyber spoofing lead to increased uncertainty. Offensive cyber activities affect nuclear weapon deterrence. Cyber attacks on nuclear weapon systems cause an escalation which results in inadvertent nuclear launches. Next off is the parole counter plan. The United States executive branch should 1. Grant individuals approved of an I-140 petition and their families parole status and employment authorization documents. 2. Announce that the parole will be continued and won't be revoked, and parolees won't be deported. 3. Conduct a comprehensive media campaign to expand public awareness surrounding the policy. Expanding parole and employment authorization resolves high-skilled immigration without LPR. And the meta in 10. There is no prohibition that would bar the USCIS from allowing beneficiaries of approved I-140 petition to apply for EAD in advance. No action by Congress would be required. Executive fiat services. The government could rely on parole authority to grant interim benefits for significant public benefits. Since parole is not a legal admission, there is no SOP argument. Since the executive is not trying to change the existing grounds of admission, Congress appears to have provided the government with broad authority to provide work authorization. No longer will controversy discredit all EB immigration. And next off is the politics. This said stimulus will pass now. It's top of the docket. Tension 11:10 debate over Corona aid will be at the top of the agenda for the post-election section. The atmosphere might lend itself to a compromising split. Produced consensus. Pelosi said she expected to deal. McConnell said he did not expect the Senate to take up the issue change. His tune immediately saying that he would try to push. And the plan prevents passage. High-skilled immigration is highly contentious. Nix and Brody in 18. This bill encapsulates how the tech industry would think high-skilled immigration should look. The legislation has its critics. Lawmakers have been split on partisan lines over immigration. Dems have demanded shielding those from immigrants of deportation. Republicans objected to a comprehensive immigration bill collapse when Boner refused to bring it to vote. Republicans who also face backlash from voters wanted to restrict immigration. The provisions for high-skilled immigrants. And stimulus requires total focus. Key to prevent economic collapse. Carabel 11:16. Nothing until February could plunge the economy toward depression. Lame Duck need to take real action. Millions have no longer benefited. Small businesses have sent PPP. Employment gains have stalled. Some business ecosystems will not be viable. Doesn't matter how resilient Americans are. We should wait too long. We have the test case, the Great Recession of 2008. By the time Obama won, the country was hemorrhaging jobs. The spending was too little and too late. The damage accelerated to every sector of the economy. Waiting too long can be as bad as doing nothing. The economic system perched at its apex. No lane that Congress has ever been able to undertake such a large and complicated spending bill. That's why the moment demands. McConnell signaled that he is open to new bill. This is a hopeful sign, but hard work needs to be done to craft it back. Just waiting until February is too late for a system that would reach the limits of recovery. And economic decline causes great power war. Leo in 18. The current political landscape of prolonged economic crisis could escalate into major military conflict. The crisis, bankrupting government policymakers managed to pull the economy back using stimulus, but did nothing to cure the disease. The consequences extend far beyond the economy. Economic distress has been characterized by antipathy towards foreign countries that can fuel unrest, terrorism, or war. Populist make matters worse despite interconnectedness. Multilateral systems issued. Proxy wars are ready. The next crisis could lead to large-scale confrontation. Go to solvency. Biden solves the app. Most qualified experts agree. Elkhorn 11:11. Why does Biden mean for immigration? Biden and Harris have long-term dedicated to immigration changes which directly affect the tech ecosystem. We're looking forward to a deluge of constraints which encourage innovation and entrepreneurship. But we see significant changes for the immigration startups, founders, investors, scientists, high-skilled protectors, and families. Biden plan to unravel executive orders and modernize their immigration system. And removing per-country caps makes the backlog work gently. In 18, the country cap doesn't affect the length of the backlog at all. It only changes who's in the backlog. If you remember the total country cap, the total number of visas doesn't increase. You still have the same number of people applying, the same number of people who be stuck in the backlog, the same wait for 100 years. Removing the per country cap will make it horrible for 100% of the people in every country. Go to the econ advantage. The plan spikes aggregate demand and fast monetary tightening. Nickel instead of a surge in immigrants will increase expenditure. Immigrants tend to a lower proportion of income than natives. They will make lower initial expenditure than have higher savings. You're likely to absorb an increase in company accompanied by inflation. This will be offset by tightening of monetary policy. This will slow down the rate at which migrants are absorbed into the economy, lower the rate at which supply adjust and increase inflationary pressures arising from demand generated by migrants. And unexpected rate hikes cause a global debt crisis and collapse of the economy. Turns the advantage. FX empire in 17. Governments across the globe have huge dollar-dominated credit spike. Rate spike would render these debts unsustainable, could lead to a global debt crisis. A higher than anticipated increase will have a significant effect on the currency market. And Turkey's economy is on the brink. Quick U.S. rate hikes collapse its economy. James in 18. Turkey has been a magnet for foreign investment from dollar-dominated loans by international banks. Turkey relies on Western institutions to deal with debt, currency, and reverse crises. Turkey's dollar-dominated credit is so large that rising rates could quickly turn Turkey to a global debt crisis. Turkey's hard currency reserve is adequate for the moment. This is not a problem. Immediate debt crisis, but likelihood that credit will try to drive, leading to a tipping point and a loss of confidence. Turkish stock and bond markets just plunge, and Turkish decline causes nuclear war to side. In 15, instability in the political arena is linked to economic instability. Any crisis in Turkey, such as inflation, have direct consequences for crime, proliferation, WMD, and terrorism threats. Are Turkey's position at the periphery of the prosperous region makes it a source destinations or and transit route prime. Turkey could act as the front line against threats. Turkey stability has been pressing to contain spillover effects, and quick rate hikes prop the renewable energy bubble, crushes the energy shift in rising rates, pop the renewable energy bubble. Will we see bankruptcies as sectors for vulnerable? Transformation of the sector was built on easy money, the era of chick money. Companies ignored cost and competition. Even in low rates, we've seen bankruptcies. Imagine what will happen if interest rates rise. And renewable energy is key to solve climate change. Steinberger in 16, renewable energy is one of the most effective tools in the fight against climate change. Renewable tech can save customers money and displace emissions and farm fossil fuels. Wind and solar energy have experienced remarkable growth and improvements over the past decade with no signs of slowing down. Renewable energy is already cheaper than fossil fuel. Renewables provide a wide range of market and public health benefits that far outweigh their cost. Planning for the future could not be done without the parallel promoting strong renewable growth in the present. Renewable energy is helping address climate change, and robust empirical studies disprove hegemony. Their authors are biased. Hacks, Fetweiss, and 17 equally plausible scenarios exist for stability. There is less U.S. intervention and less conflict. No direct relationship exists. U.S. activity had made the Persian Gulf and Middle East worse. Hegemony failed to bring the peace. Stability even exists where the potential for intervention is minimal. Military spending when compared to conflict, there is no correlation. Global conflict declined when the military was cut. There does not seem to be connection between warfare and U.S. GDP. Alliance commitments and military presence. Post-Cold War strategies of American presence differ in important ways. In no case did disorder materialize. Armed conflicts fall steadily, irrespective of strategic fact that Washington choose. There is only evidence regarding U.S. power and international stability suggests the two are unrelated. Immigration restrictions are key to growth. COVID creates a bring for the next depression. Cambodia and 20 labor cities employing for immigrants showed the worst stature for the since the Great Recession, even higher for immigrants. It makes no sense to bring in workers during the crisis. By increasing the supply of workers, immigration will have a negative effect on employment. After the economy recovers, we have the debate, but for now, we need to reduce foreign job seekers, and warming's inevitable. Sherman in 17, climate change shows no signs of slowing. There is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere ever in history, 410 parts per billion. Carbon dioxide permanently professed 400 ppm. Paris aimed to keep 2 degrees Celsius, the irreversible tipping point. This is not good news for the effort that Trump got the U.S. participation in Paris, and no disease impact. Agila in 16, the human trait is resilience through sanitation, vaccinations, and therapies. Any microbe reaching extinction is unlikely. No therapy or vaccine would be applied. It would need to high transmissibility. Preparedness exists. Dependency on blood transmission, limit contagion. Needle exchange and barrier contraceptives curtail the transmission risk. Every disease falls short. Genetic variations open up imperviousness to infection. Adaptability ensures a large production of live humans are evolving. They have no uniqueness for a shortage now. The evidence that they outlined across is from 2016 and obviously doesn't reflect the current labor market. And I can put together a doc of just the cards I read if you all want.
I mean, I was fine, but if
Okay.
anyone would like one, that's also fine too.
Okay. If not, I'm just good for cross-ex.
Okay, cool. Status of the counterplan?
Conditional.
Okay. So then let's go on to the first off. What evidence says that the Department of Defense isn't going to hire people in the U.S.?
They can't because they have to be citizens to work for the DoD.
Okay. Cool. That's fine. Then let's move on to the second disad, or let's move on to the parole counterplan. So what? Never mind. Let's move on to politics.
Okay.
So we're in a period where, like, why won't Trump veto the bill?
He's already expressed support for it.
When?
Yesterday.
What evidence says that?
I mean, I can read evidence. You haven't made that argument yet.
Okay. Why would So if Trump is okay with the stimulus bill, why would immigration derail him?
Because, well, the argument isn't about Trump signing it or not. It's about the infighting and overall lack of bipartisanship that happens whenever immigration debates are introduced in Congress. The Nixon-Brody evidence is specific to previous debates about high-skilled immigration and says that it causes like factionalization between parties because Republicans are opposed to immigration, Democrats support it, and it causes fights in Congress, which derails passage of the bill.
But why? Where does your evidence say that something like that will derail passage of the bill? Your evidence seems to indicate it's the Carabelle evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, can you read me the line?
I mean, what part of it are you wanted to ask for?
Something about how immigration will derail the bill.
Oh, I mean, it's a politics aside. I made a link about how bipartisanship has collapsed post-plan. I mean, our evidence says that we need strong bipartisan support in order to pass the bill. That's obviously true because you can't pass it without a majority. Immigration sparks debates in Congress and the writing and implementation and the filibuster and everything that
I understand how politics disad works.
I mean,
there's just a reason most people think politics disads are pretty bad in general.
Oh, I mean, I love them, so.
Okay, so then let's move on to specifically the argument that you make on econ. When you say the plan spikes aggregate demand, why won't it increase aggregate supply?
Because in the short term, before immigrants are able to enter the job market and be able to settle down in their lives, they obviously have a higher increase in aggregate demand first.
Yeah,
and also the associated, so you also can't claim that you create a bigger increase in aggregate supply, because immigrants bring their families over and children can't contribute to supply. They only contribute to demand.
Couple of things. Where does my app spec that dependents are allowed to come in? Two,
I mean,
if we've already discussed that high skilled immigrants must be actively employed to come into the United States, why do I still trigger this link?
Well, first question, all EB immigrants are allowed to bring their families over. That's how the family-based immigration works. Two, just because they enter in the job market still doesn't answer my argument that there are still associated dependents that come with them that increase aggregate supply or aggregate demand higher in the short term. And I can also read a ton of evidence on this if I decide to go for this argument that high-skilled immigrants, the type of immigrants you bring in, an increase in wages, all increase inflation at much faster than the pace that supply raises.
Okay, that's fine. I'll start prep now. Okay, and prep. I have 115 used, and I will upload the doc. Okay, cool. It should be sent. And the order will be one off, new off. Then it'll be solvency. Then the advantage. And then it'll be the counter plan. And then it'll be the internal brain drain disad. And then the politics disad. Okay. Anybody not ready? Okay. Interpretation. Negative should not be allowed to read conditional counterplans. There's this condo. Vote affirmative. It's a priori A ground. Conditional counterplans force the app to argue against the possibility of change. This is unfair to the app because those arguments can be extended against the app as solvency defense in order to justify even weak DAs. Leads to poorly researched ground and discourages either team from taking the time to analyze solvency mechanisms. Real comparative analysis only happens without severance. B, reciprocity. The app can't just click out of planks a plan. The negative shouldn't be allowed to do so either. Condo allows the advantage of another no risk position in addition to T. Gives the next structural advantage in the 1R. We can't redo the 1AR. They get to wipe away offense that they don't like. Hold them to a stable argument table. Vote theory is a voter for fairness and education. Let's go on to solvency. The first response they make is that they say Biden will solve the plan, but this is very specific to this is not very specific. It's talking about general immigration reform. It never says the word 600,000 employment visas or increases in H-1B visas. That means that you can gut check this argument because there's no evidence indicating that Biden will pass the specifics necessary to solve the plan. Then the next part says that there's says that the backlog is bad and getting rid of per country caps, but I also increase visas to by hundreds of thousands and increase H-1B visas. That means that there's not going to be a backlog to visas because there's so many more spots that people can fill as well as there's increases in filing costs that allow USCIS to work better. Let's go into the econ flow. The first piece of evidence that he reads is the nickel evidence. First, this evidence is only talking about immigrants in general. My evidence is specific to highly skilled immigrants who boost the economy through complementing American workers and expanding labor markets. Second, your card is inconclusive at worst, and at worst offense. I'm blue, nickel 7. We will see an increase in output and downward pressure on inflation, which will further increase output. This pattern will accentuate in the rise of migration, leads to enhanced labor market flexibility and false equilibrium and a weight of unemployment. Then they read the FX17 card. This card isn't talking about U.S. debt. It's just talking about global debt. United States debt is already so high, it's non-unique, and it's viewed as a uniquely stable asset. That means that there's not going to be any sort of collapse. And the Fed also said it's going to keep interest rates low. Then they read this argument about Turkey, but their evidence is never talking about United States specific interest rates. It's talking about the stability of Western governments in general. And Western governments are obviously going to stay stable, as well as I argue that I'm going to boost the economy. Then they read this piece of evidence that says that Turkey is going to devolve into nuclear war. But you should gut check this argument, because in 2008, Turkey also fell into a recession, but we never saw any sort of nuclear war, and their card is from 2005. Then they read this evidence that says that so that talks about renewable energy and solving for that, but I'm not going for the warming scenario, and they read defense on it, so it doesn't matter. Let's go on to the growth scenario. You can extend the Thompson evidence. It says the United States is ceding technological leadership to China right now. That's really bad, because the United States is losing tech centrality. When they perceive China as on top as an economic leader, then that means that they devolve into war. War specifically, my evidence says intense global conflict. They respond to this by just responding to the two cards below it that are about hegemony, but they never respond to the economic competition that's devolving into war between the United States. That means the Thompson evidence is functionally conceded. I'm not going for the hedge scenario. You can extend the Fetwist evidence. Then they make this argument that says that immigration hinders growth, but it's specifically talking about low-skilled immigrants. I say that we expand growth during COVID because we're expanding labor markets, because immigrants are working in cutting-edge sectors. That's why the Yale Leahy Easton evidence says for every additional skilled worker hired, there's 7.5 new domestic jobs created. Then on innovation, you can extend the innovation scenario. All concede the defense on climate change and pandemics, but they concede the Dreyfus and Lovell evidence that says that innovation is key to solve things like terrorism, and it's key to world peace. That means it's going to be a prerequisite to all their sort of disads, because as long as we can innovate out of things like food insecurity, conflict, those sorts of things. It's a terminal impact that says that only innovation can lead to world peace. Then let's go on to the counterplan. Perm do both, presumption flips app, and immigrants on parole can't even apply for work permits. Can't solve the app. Roth 19. Parolers will face a higher level of scrutiny when they apply for work permits. USCIS issued a policy enhancing adjudicators' discretion to deny work permits. New guidance enters the use of discretion. USCIS will consider employments when based on the facts of the circumstances of each individual case. USCIS finds a favorable exercise of discretion is warranted, and if they don't have LPR status, that means it's easy for them to go back to their host country, which means that the United States isn't realizing any long-term economic gains. Then let's go on to the dissat about STEM workers and internal brain drain. A direct quote from CrossX is that the DoD won't hire people that aren't citizens. My app doesn't lead to any sort of citizenship. That means that there's no trade-off between the workforce, and the DoD will continue recruiting highly skilled immigrants inside the United States. Then they say that it's going to disrupt STEM workers in the United States. That's the Ornis evidence. It's from 2013. You can cross-apply my Kelly evidence. It's from 2016. They try to indict it because it's from 4 years ago. Well, then you need to read more recent evidence than that. Kelly says that there's a lack of STEM workers in the United States right now, so there's not going to be any sort of isolated trade-off. And then you can cross-apply the innovation scenario. Specifically, I'm going to lead to innovation, which means that we can resolve things like cybersecurity threats. Look, people are still going to be like in the cybersecurity field because they know that the DoD can't hire workers who aren't inside of the United States, as well as this is such a long-term trend that you should prioritize the F. Their evidence is also really bad at this and has no warrants. Politics. Highly skilled immigrants are bipartisan in Congress. Mir said 20. A real bipartisan breakthrough flew under the radar and overshadowed the category of impeachment. The fairness for high skilled immigrants passed the House with bipartisan support. We come up with a proposal that moves us in the right direction, and no backlash and turns. New data finds that immigrant solutions divided government boost bipartisanship. Norney 11-7. The politically divided government presents an imperative to work across the aisle. Immigrants are uniquely positioned for both parties. New data reinforce that voters across the spectrum have permanent solutions for immigrants. America's divided on political spectrum. The immigration poetry established our values. Republicans, Democrats find common ground. Americans say that immigrants are hardworking. 86% among Republicans. 79% view immigrants as hardworking. And linked the app is the only way to revitalize the economy for several reasons. A, immigrants disproportionately contribute to economic growth. Extend Yale Leahy Easton. Every highly skilled immigrant creates 7.5 new jobs. B, immigrants induce investment. Extend Schwee. The perception of hard caps on highly skilled immigrants creates uncertainty and causes firms to not invest. C, highly skilled immigrants prevent offshoring. Extend Glennon. Stringent caps cause firms to offshore in India, China, and Canada, etc., that are responsible for 80% of U.S. R&D. D, immigrants provide stability during recessions. Extend Huang. Immigration is associated with resilience in terms of employment and growth and allows to recover more quickly. And E, highly skilled immigrants increase innovation. That's the DOS et al. Evidence. Prefer my evidence. Every card I cite is peer-reviewed or written by economic and immigration efforts. Well, theirs is just speculative.
Okay, 4 minutes.
Okay, cool.